Hmm.
You know, like I'll just throw out one nerdy art reference. There's an Italian artist called Caravaggio, and when you look at his work, it is so photorealistic that you don't really expect it to be from the time period it is, because no one in the world was making art like he suddenly began making.
Right.
And I like bored an entire seminar one day because that's all I wanted to talk about was how much does that prove that true genius exists when someone just comes out of nowhere, and does something that no one's ever done.
Right.
And, with that comes the other end of the spectrum, or the various, points on the spectrum where the people who are thinking creatively are thinking it with, a challenged mind. You and I have talked, and I have suffered from depression, and it's certainly, and the other part of that too is at an earlier point in my life when things were going really, really poorly, I wrote some of the best stuff that I've ever written in my life.
Mm.
Most of it poetry, and have never really been able to recapture that level of intensity, especially with my poetry. And, in my mind, there was this true and tried correlation between suffering and art, and that got me thinking more about that. How many suffering people, are creating art, have to create art,
Yeah.
whether it's music or literature or visual art or whatever. I just think those brain functions just seem to get all tangled up. There's my scientific conclusion. The the bill will be in the mail for my medical expertise.
So, for those of you who are just joining us back, I think we're back live. What we're discussing now is the link between creativity and depression, and why it seems like the rates of creativity and even things like suicide seem to be much higher in the creative community than not. And Scott just gave an amazing answer to that question. I hope you got most of that. So you're talking about suffering. Do you think, how necessary is suffering for an artist, a writer in particular, since that's what we're talking about here, in terms of quality of their craft, their understanding of humanity, etc.?
The cool thing I've found out is it's not necessary at all,
Hmm.
because I've since all of that stuff that we just talked about written things that I think are better than anything I ever wrote while I was suffering, in terms of scope. And, we're talking long works and stuff, poetry and stuff like that, that probably when I was suffering, I couldn't have even done,
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't have to drive the car.
Hmm.
Might be a passenger in the car,
Yeah.
because even when things were going great, and I keep going back to the Sarah stories, but that's my personal breakthrough. So a lot of what I love about writing is attached to that. And um, when I first started getting that working and realized this is going to work, there were still places in it where I had to call upon memories of pain,
Hmm.
because I wanted to, you know, make the character suffer. And I don't mean that in a sadistic way, but I wanted to make the character actually suffer so that when the reader read it, they went, "Ooh, I kind of felt that."
Yeah.
And so in that case, yeah, there's always a little suffering somewhere, but it doesn't have to be why you're doing it, I
Right.
guess is what I'm trying to say.
Awesome. All right. Well, on that upbeat note, we're going to end this first episode of Games with Writers. I hope you all enjoyed watching it. Sorry about the little technical mishap. I'll look into that, see if we can get that figured out, why that happened. Glad we were able to get back on, though, and conclude the interview. And then, Scott, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope everybody gets out there and checks out your stuff, and I know they'll enjoy it.
I had a blast. And
All
yes,
right.
please buy all my books. In fact, buy multiple copies of all my books.
It's kind of like vote early, vote often kind of thing.
Yes, same idea.
All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Bye, y'all.